My entitled team leader took credit for my presentation, boasting, "That's just how the corporate ladder works. You do the work, I get the praise." When I called him out, he laughed. "Who's going to believe you over me?" His smug look disappeared when the CEO played security footage and stated, "Actually, we believe her, and you're no longer a part of this company." I worked at a tech company in Chicago, where I had been for several years. I was known for being reliable and hardworking, though I often felt overlooked. When the company announced a competition for innovative ideas to present to the CEO, I saw it as my chance to shine. I dedicated countless hours to developing a proposal aimed at addressing a significant gap in our product line. My apartment became cluttered with notes and drafts as I refined my ideas. After weeks of effort, I had a presentation I believed could make a real impact. Wanting to ensure its quality, I approached my team leader, Mark, for feedback. Mark had always presented himself as supportive and experienced, so I trusted his judgment. "Mark," I said, handing him a copy of my presentation, "I've been working on this for the CEO's competition. I'd appreciate your thoughts." He glanced through it and nodded. "This looks promising. Let's discuss it over lunch tomorrow." The next day, as I walked into the office, I noticed an unusual buzz among my colleagues. People were gathered around, talking excitedly. Curious, I approached the group and saw a presentation being displayed on a large screen. My heart sank. It was my presentation, but Mark was the one presenting it. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. I confronted Mark after his presentation. "Mark, that's my work," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He smirked. "Welcome to the corporate world. You do the work, I get the praise. That's how it works." I was stunned. "This isn't right." He laughed. "And who's going to believe you over me?" Determined to prove the truth, I remembered that our office had security cameras in the common areas. If I could access the footage of our meeting, it would show that I had shared the presentation with Mark. I approached Jake in IT, a friend I hoped could help. "Jake, I need a favor. Is there any way to access footage from the past week? It's important." Jake looked uneasy. "Accessing security footage without authorization is against company policy. I could lose my job." I understood his position. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Mark took credit for my work, and I need to prove it. Jake sighed. "I can't help you directly. But if you file a formal request citing a security concern, it will be reviewed." Following his advice, I submitted a formal request to HR, explaining the situation and expressing my concerns about intellectual property theft. Days passed without a response. The tension in the office was palpable. Mark continued to bask in the attention, while I felt increasingly isolated. Then, I received an email, a meeting invitation with the CEO, Mark, and the HR director. The subject was clarification on recent proposal submissions. Nervous but resolute, I entered the conference room. The CEO sat at the head of the table, Mark to her right, and the HR director to her left. "We've received concerns regarding the originality of the recent proposal," the CEO began, looking between Mark and me. Mark feigned surprise. "I'm not sure what this is about." The CEO nodded to the HR director, who dimmed the lights and played a video on the screen. It was footage from the cafeteria, showing me handing my presentation to Mark and our subsequent conversation. The room was silent. "Mark," the CEO's voice was firm, "can you explain this?" Mark stammered. "I must have confused our discussions with my own ideas. It was an honest mistake." The CEO's expression hardened. "An honest mistake that led to you presenting someone else's work as your own?" Mark's confidence crumbled. "I didn't mean any harm." Turning to me, the CEO's demeanor softened. "We value integrity. Your dedication is commendable." Addressing the room, she continued, "Effective immediately, Mark is relieved of his duties. We have no place for deceit in our company." Mark's face turned pale. "Please, give me another chance." The CEO's decision was final. "Security will escort you out." As Mark was led away, the CEO turned to me. "Prepare your presentation. You'll deliver it to the board next week." Relief and vindication washed over me. "Thank you for this opportunity." She offered a rare smile. "Talent deserves recognition. Let's ensure this doesn't happen again." In the following days, I focused on refining my proposal. The board's reception was positive, leading to the project's approval and my promotion to lead the initiative. Reflecting on the experience, I realized the importance of standing up for oneself and the value of integrity in the corporate world. Hard work and honesty ultimately prevail. For those facing similar challenges, remember, your dedication deserves acknowledgement. Advocate for yourself, seek allies, and trust that the truth will emerge, even in corporate politics. After that meeting, things changed, but not how I expected. At first, it felt like I was finally getting the recognition I'd earned. The CEO personally sent out a company-wide email announcing my promotion and credited me for the idea that Mark tried to steal. People congratulated me in the hallways, even those who barely spoke to me before. It felt good for a minute. But then, the whispers started. It wasn't everyone, just a few, but they were loud enough to make me hear it. She only got promoted because she played the victim, or there's no way she came up with that alone. One guy even joked during lunch, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Guess the security footage gets you more than just parking validation these days." I kept my head down and worked harder. I thought proving myself would shut them up. I worked late, showed up early, made every deadline. I ran the new project like my life depended on it. And it was doing well, better than projections, in fact. But no matter how hard I worked, that feeling of being under a microscope never left. 2 weeks later, HR scheduled another meeting. I walked in expecting it to be about project updates or maybe some follow-up paperwork. Instead, I found someone new sitting across from me, Nancy from legal. She introduced herself, then pulled out a printed email. "We've received a formal complaint against you. An anonymous report claims that the idea you pitched wasn't entirely yours either." I just stared at her. "They say you stole it from a former colleague who left the company last year." My stomach dropped. I asked to see the details, but Nancy said they couldn't reveal much because of company confidentiality rules. She said it wasn't an official investigation yet, but they had to look into it. I told her it was a lie, that the project was mine from start to finish. She nodded, but her face didn't change. She looked like someone who had heard every excuse in the book. After that meeting, I went back to my desk in a daze. People noticed. I could tell by the way they stared and stopped talking when I walked by. Whatever rumor had started was spreading fast. I spent the next 3 nights pulling every draft, every file, every email I had related to the project. I created a massive timeline showing how the idea evolved from rough notes to a full presentation. I printed it all out and dropped it on Nancy's desk first thing Friday morning. She looked at it and nodded. "This helps. We'll add it to the record." That's all she said. "No, thank you, no, we believe you." Just cold professionalism. Later that day, I ran into Jake from IT again in the break room. He looked around, then lowered his voice. "I don't want to scare you, but you should know Mark's not done." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "He's been talking to people. A few from his old team, a couple of folks in management. Trying to dig up anything he can use to make you look bad. Said if he's going down, he's not going alone." I didn't know what to say. I felt the anger bubbling up again, but this time it was mixed with fear. I asked Jake if he'd heard anything specific, and he just said, "Watch your back. He's trying to make it look like you stole the project from someone else. He's trying to flip the narrative." The next week, the pressure got worse. I was pulled into meeting after meeting, defending myself against vague accusations and questions meant to trip me up. At one point, I was asked if I had ever discussed the idea outside the company. I hadn't. But when I asked why, they said, "Just covering all angles." It felt like I was on trial for my own success. Then, one morning, I found an envelope on my desk. No name, no return address. Just "read me" written in block letters. Inside was a printed email thread between Mark and another former employee, someone who left after a scandal involving misused client data. The thread showed them talking about ways to frame me and discredit the project. They even joked about making it look like I copied the idea from an old archive. My hands were shaking. I immediately forwarded the emails to legal and HR and asked for a formal investigation into Mark and anyone helping him. It got quiet after that. Really quiet. People avoided me in the hallways. Meetings got canceled without explanation. HR stopped updating me. I kept my head down, but it felt like the walls were closing in. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. And then, a week later, something else happened. Someone broke into my office. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing was stolen. But my drawers were open, papers scattered. Someone had gone through my files. Security said they were looking into it, but I never got a follow-up. I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Mark may have been escorted out of the building, but whatever game he was playing was still going. And it felt like I was running out of moves. The break-in changed everything. Before, it was gossip, under-the-table rumors, whispered lies. But now someone had stepped into my space, touched my things, and tried to rattle me. I stopped leaving anything in my office. I started locking up even non-sensitive documents. I even began walking with my car keys laced through my fingers like a weapon, just in case. It felt paranoid. But I was tired of being blindsided. A few days later, I noticed something strange in the system. I was reviewing documents for our next board review, routine stuff. When I saw an older version of the presentation file with metadata that didn't make sense. The timestamp was backdated to 2 weeks before I had even started working on it, and it listed a user ID I didn't recognize. I pulled the logs. I shouldn't have been able to, but my promotion gave me access I hadn't had before. The user ID was tied to a dummy account, buried under layers of admin rights. It looked like someone had tried to plant a fake version of the project to make it look like I copied it. I went straight to Jake again. He stared at the screen. This is bad. This isn't just office drama anymore. This is calculated. I asked him to trace it. It took hours, but he found something. The dummy account was created 2 days after Mark got fired. It had only been used from one terminal, an old laptop that was signed out under someone else's name. That someone was Denise, a mid-level manager who'd always been oddly close with Mark. She worked in another department, but she'd been around long enough to know people. She was quiet, didn't make waves, but she had access to IT resources through a systems migration project she'd led last year. I brought it to HR and legal. I thought that was it. That they'd see what I saw and finally shut this all down. But instead of acting fast, they dragged their feet. Weeks passed. They claimed they were investigating, but nothing changed. Denise was still working, walking around like none of it touched her. And then I noticed a shift. My project started getting pulled apart. Meetings were canceled. Funding was delayed. One of the execs started questioning my leadership during calls, subtle at first, then more openly. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Mark. He was a pawn. Someone else was pulling strings. Someone who didn't want me to succeed. Someone high enough up to stall HR, to interfere with my project, to let this mess fester. It clicked one night when I saw Denise leaving the building late, almost 9 p.m., and getting into a car I recognized. It belonged to Dan Miller, the VP of Strategic Development. The same exec who'd started criticizing my work. Dan had been Mark's mentor. Quietly, but everyone knew it. He was also known for protecting his people. I realized then, Mark wasn't acting alone. Dan was trying to bury this. He was using Denise to sabotage me, trying to push me out without getting his hands dirty. They didn't want me fired. That would be too obvious. They wanted me to quit. I started documenting everything. Every email. Every delay. Every meeting where my voice was ignored or my authority questioned. I printed logs, took screenshots, even used a spare phone to record certain conversations. I wasn't going to just survive this, I was going to expose it. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. So I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Elise. She used to work in communications before moving on to another company. We were never close, but we respected each other. She had always been blunt and smart, with a sharp eye for reading people. Elise, I wrote in a message, I need your help. Off the record. We met up for coffee 2 days later. I laid out everything Mark, The fake files, the office break-in, the planted account, Denise, Dan. She listened without interrupting, then leaned back and said, "They're trying to erase you." "I know. But you've got receipts," she said. "So give them a reason to regret it." "What do you mean?" "Leak it. Carefully. Internally. Let the right people see what's really going on." It was risky, but I saw the sense in it. The company had policies about whistleblowing. If I went to the CEO again, she might listen, but only if I had overwhelming evidence. And I had to be ready for the blowback. So I put together a full dossier. Everything from the original metadata to security logs, printed emails, and timelines. I included connections, Denise's access logs, Dan's interference in funding, even that late-night car meetup. And then I submitted it directly to the CEO. Not via email. I printed it, bound it, and slipped it under her office door after hours, marked only with my initials and a handwritten note. "Before you let them destroy what this company stands for, read this." The next morning, she called an emergency board meeting. But that's when the real storm hit. HR tried to play dumb. Dan acted offended, accused me of manipulating evidence. Denise denied everything. But then Jake stepped forward. He backed up the logs. He verified the access points. He showed them how the fake project file was planted. It was chaos. The CEO didn't say much during the first hour. She just watched. Listened. Took notes. Then she stood up and said, "We're not done here. But we are going to find out exactly how deep this goes." She ordered an external audit. She put Dan and Denise on administrative leave. But something about her tone told me there was more going on behind the scenes. And I was right. Because that night, I found another note under my door. No envelope. Just 5 words. "You should have stayed quiet." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the note in my hand, reading it over and over again. "You should have stayed quiet." There were no fingerprints, no handwriting to match, nothing I could take to anyone. But the message was clear: someone was warning me. Or threatening me. Either way, they wanted me scared. And it worked. For a few hours, I thought about walking away. Just quitting. Leaving it all behind. I even drafted a resignation letter. But then I thought about the nights I worked until 3 a.m., about my idea being stolen, about every meeting where they smirked while dragging me down. I thought about Mark's smug face when he said, "That's how the ladder works," and Dan's little games in meetings, and Denise sneaking around after hours. I deleted the resignation letter. 2 days later, everything changed. The CEO called another emergency meeting, this time with the board, HR, legal, and both internal and external auditors. No warning. No time to prepare. Everyone was told to report to the main conference room. When I walked in, the mood was ice cold. People looked nervous. Denise wasn't there. Dan wasn't either. The CEO stood at the head of the table. She didn't waste time. We completed the first round of the audit. "What we found was disturbing," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "Unauthorized system access. Fabricated documents. Coordinated sabotage attempts. Intimidation." Everyone was silent. She turned to the lead auditor, who laid out the findings in plain language. It wasn't just a couple of people trying to protect each other. It was a cover-up going back months. Mark had been involved in multiple similar incidents before, minor infractions brushed off because of Dan's protection. Denise had quietly wiped records, redirected logs, and rerouted access credentials. All of it was traceable. And it had happened under Dan's watch, with his approval. Then the bomb dropped. The CEO played a security video. This one wasn't just me and Mark in the cafeteria. It was Dan and Denise, sitting in the office after hours, talking strategy. Planning how to push me out, how to pin the idea on a former employee, how to control the narrative. There was even a joke from Dan: if she doesn't quit on her own, maybe a little scare will help. Slip her a note or two. Nothing illegal, just enough. You could feel the air leave the room. The CEO let the silence hang before she spoke again. "As of today, Dan Miller is terminated from his position. Denise Fletcher is terminated. And we're filing charges." Murmurs broke out. People were stunned. Some looked scared. Then she looked at me. Her tone changed. You, she said, showed incredible resilience. But I need to address one more thing. I froze. We also reviewed the original idea's development timeline. During the audit, we found fragments of similar concepts submitted by a junior intern last year. It was never developed, but it existed. My stomach sank. I knew what was coming. We believe your idea was original and substantially different, but part of it may have been subconsciously inspired by material from a brainstorming folder you had access to at the time. We're not accusing you of theft. But this is a reminder for everyone: intellectual property can be complex. It was a slap, but not fatal. Still, it stung. I had accessed those folders. I didn't remember seeing that intern's draft, but I must have. Maybe it slipped into my mind when I was pulling ideas together. I take responsibility, I said quietly. I didn't mean to overlook anything. The CEO nodded. That's the kind of ownership we want here. Then she surprised everyone. We're launching a new innovation ethics program. You're going to lead it. Full support. Full authority. Report directly to me. Just like that, the room shifted again. Whispers turned into respect. Heads nodded. Eyes changed. I had taken hits, but I was still standing and they knew it. But there was one last thing I had to do. I tracked down the intern, the one whose idea had sparked part of mine. Her name was Maya. She had left the company after 6 months, completely unnoticed. I found her on LinkedIn, reached out, explained everything. I told her the truth, gave her credit, and offered to bring her back. She didn't reply at first. Then, one evening, I got a message. I've never been acknowledged before. I didn't think anyone cared. I'd love to come back. Thank you. Weeks passed. Things calmed down. Dan tried to threaten legal action. He failed. Denise lawyered up, but when the emails and logs were shown, she folded. Mark tried to stir sympathy on LinkedIn, claiming he was betrayed by the corporate machine. Nobody bought it. And that note? The one that said, "You should have stayed quiet?" I framed it. I hung it on my office wall, right next to the plaque for innovation leadership. Every time I look at it, I remember the hell they tried to drag me through. They thought fear would make me shut up. It made me louder.